Hello, hello. So,
First of all, give it up for Ted. I don't know if you guys know who Ted is,
Oh.
but Ted is, before we even start, Ted has been doing work in the masculinity space and male violence space and for 30 years now. And he was one of the first people I reached out to when Ted asked me to give a TED Talk, and I was terrified. And he really welcomed me into the community, and we sat down. We were in LA, and we had lunch and coffee, and you just like opened your heart to me, and we've been friends ever since. So if you don't know about A Call to Men, the organization that Ted runs with his partner Tony, please take a look. And hi, Claudia. My editor for Boys Will Be Human is here. How sweet.
thank you so much for that, Justin, and so excited about having this conversation with you all around Boys Will Be Human. But before I do that, I want to say to you that I really appreciate how, it's important that men in particular use their influence and platform in a positive way to promote healthy masculinity, to promote love, right, fairness, equity. And you really do that not only with your words, but here I am, right? So talking about, and here you are introducing me to the Call to Men. That does a lot for our organization and all that we do. So I really appreciate how you really show up and walk the walk and talk the talk. So I'm honored to be here with you.
Man. So much
All
love.
right.
What a like a, I don't get to do these with like intimate groups. Like what a chill, like vibey evening here in New York. This is cool.
So I had lots of questions kind of written out, and then, Justin and I are brothers. So as we were talking in the green room,
I said, don't
we're
ask me. Let's just talk.
Let's just talk. So we're going to talk. So I do want to acknowledge, though, that I think that it was said early on a little bit about Justin, but I did meet him 6 years ago or so, around the TED Talk in particular, and he did an amazing job with that TED Talk. I would ask all of you to share it with all the men in your life. Just send them the link and say, hey, you need to watch this. That's all. It's already gotten 8 million views, 26 languages, I believe. Then from that came the New York Times bestselling book that he authored called Man Enough. Then from that, because by the time we're men, adults men, a lot of the ideas, beliefs, attitudes, behaviors are kind of embedded in us, right? Now, not embedded in our DNA, embedded in our socialization. Like, that's really important, right? So when we talk about behaviors that we need to change, this is not inherent to who we are as men. It's what we're taught in a male-dominated patriarchal society, honestly, right? That's what we're taught, and that's how these things get played out. So then from Man Enough, which is a brilliant, transformational...
I asked him to read it just for all you. So I asked him to read the book, and we talked, and he had literally printed out 375 pages, and he was making handwritten notes. And he was giving me notes and feedback, and you didn't give me as many notes as I wanted from you.
Well, you know what?
But it was like just amazing to see this man like print out all of this, and he was really doing the work, and that's what friendship is. Man.
Yes, and I didn't feel like I needed to give notes because I needed to love him and support him, and this is authentically who you are. So you have editors, you have other folks who can chop it up. Right, I wanted him to say. I wanted him to know that yes, this is beautiful,
thanks,
and this is what needs to be said. Right, because authenticity, as much as men are connected to strength, right. And by the way, we work with men all over the world, and when I ask men about strength, and if I ask them to take away the physical attribution of strength, how much you can bench press, you take that away, and you look at all the other characteristics of strength. And I'm asking this to men. And I asked them, do you know more strong women or strong men? And they all say strong women. Now, that's not to say that women are better than men. It's just to say that men don't own strength. And then we take it a little bit further and say, and if we're going to talk about physical capability, guys, let's talk about physical capability, right? Giving birth, creating life. Now, how much can you bench press, bruh? You know what I mean? So from the Man Enough book, then knowing that by the time we're men, there's some things that are, again, embedded in our socialization, so we need to go earlier, right? We want to go upstream to prevent these things that are problematic for women, girls, the LGBTQ, transgender, non-conforming community. But all of those things that are harmful to them, we can draw a line right to the harm that causes men and boys as well. So then, Boys Will Be Human gets written, and it's a brilliant book. So let's get to it.
I mean, I think Ted should just talk the whole time. You can see why he's been a mentor to me, which is why I'm so happy that you're here.
I'm happy too.
Because I'm just, half the time, I just regurgitate shit that I learned from him.
Well, listen, but I do need to ask you some things because I also, I have some age on me, so there's some wisdom, I hope. And when the applause came in, and no matter what your religious belief is, hopefully you'll be able to appreciate this story. Jesus came into Nazareth on a mule, and they were applauding for Jesus. I know that I was the mule. So here we are with you.
Oh, come on.
So here we are with you.
I thought it was going somewhere else because
no. So here we are.
I was like,
with
where is
you.
this story going? If I put my hair down, I've heard I look like Jesus.
No, they're here to hear. They are here to hear from you. So I want to get to it.
Listen, we know how the story ended with Jesus. Also,
yes, we did.
The mule lived.
All right, so Boys Will Be Human. What inspired you to create this wonderful tool that's not only, so it's written for a certain demographic of boys, like an age, did you have an age range in mind when you wrote it?
Yeah, I was thinking 12 would be the right age,
Yep.
but as Claudia can attest, it's hard. So it was 10, and then I was like, no, it can't be 10, that's too young. So it's 11 and up.
Okay, so it's 11 and up, but as I was reading the book, it became clear to me that, so if I'm a father or a mother reading this book with my child, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if they're reading it and I pick it up and say, oh, what about this, what about that? I'm learning some things too.
That was the point. I think
Right.
I learned more writing it about myself and then rereading it than I even did with Man Enough.
Yeah, and I think the same is true going the other way, that if there's a sibling in the household that is younger than that 11-year-old boy that the parent or uncle or godparent might have purchased it for, can be a really impactful tool also. And for educators, right? These are things we can pull out as teachers, as educators, as youth mentors, and say, oh, let's talk about this, or let's talk about that. There's so much that you cover in here. Is there one particular chapter that that's really stands out for you?
Yeah, the chapter on sex is a very emotionally vulnerable chapter, because I was trying to figure out how I could get to these young boys and imagining myself as that boy. Like, what could I have said to myself? What could I have taught myself about sex, about porn, about sexual assault at that age that could have stayed with me and prevented a lot of the harm that happened to me? And so that was a big one. And trying to wrap my head around how do I talk to an 11-year-old or a 13-year-old about this stuff that, it's nobody's fault, but was never really talked about with me. And I got my dad's here tonight. We did a full hour of the Tamron Hall show.
Yes.
And my dad has taught me so many amazing things about what it means to be a man. And then in that department, didn't teach me anything. But it's only because his dad didn't teach him anything. And this is how we learn, right, as men, as boys. We don't learn about these things from our parents. Right. There's this innate awkwardness that I think our parents experienced in their generation that then was passed on to us, and we have to be cycle breakers there, because we're essentially just sending out billions and billions of kids around the world ill-prepared. Yeah. And they're learning about sex from porn.
Yes.
Which is a very unhealthy place. It might be the worst sex ed teacher in the entire world.
It is.
And yet, when I go and speak at campuses, and I know you do this work all over the country, and you ask all 18-year-olds, hey, did your parents teach you about sex? Raise your hand. Nobody raises their hands. Mm-hmm. Where'd you learn about sex? Mm-hmm. Porn? Right. Everyone raises their hands. Right. And that's a terrifying thing. We wonder why sexual assault is where it's at.
Yes.
You know, and you talk about trickling downstream. Your organization then has to deal with that.
Right.
So it's like, how could I get to these kids in a way? And the only way that I could figure it out was to share my story, and go back in time to being 11 and 12 and remembering those experiences. And it was also hard. It was hard to write that. I had a lot of stuff come up for me when I was writing the boys' book, but it also healed a lot. You know, because essentially all we're doing as adults is healing the traumas that happened to us when we were children. Right. That's really what adulting is.
Right. And hopefully not passing it down to
and
us.
then, well, and you generally do.
Right.
And then you have this beautiful child, for those of you that are old enough, and one day those of you who aren't maybe will if you choose to, and that child will trigger all the shit. They're just a walking example of the trauma that happened to you. That's right. And you're like, oh, so really childhood is just about generational healing. Which then goes back to why I wanted to write the book. If we could just make it a little easier, if we could just talk to our kids, if I could have the book that I needed at that age, the older brother, the sibling, the friend, maybe I would have been a little less messed up. But I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I'm healing. Right.
You're doing well, and you're seeking to make the world better, and that's what we really. Who can ask for more than that, right? And let's lean into this just a little bit more, because as we talk about the book being written for an 11-year-old, and then we're talking about, well, the chapter is around sex, I can see parents being like, oh boy, like 11 years old? Yes, 11 years old. Like, these are conversation starters.
Well, Ted's got the statistics.
Right.
And the statistics are scary.
They are scary.
So please share.
So there's one study that's out that says that at least 80% of all fifth graders, a year younger than this, right, 10 years old, have already seen pornography, right? So what does that look like? So now I have children, and we would always put parental controls on their phone. But then they're in class with Johnny, who says, oh, look, right? So now they're still seeing it. So now, and what they see, the pornography that they're seeing, when I was their age, looks like Victoria's Secret ads that you see in a magazine or a mall. I mean, that was what extreme porn, that was it. Where now it's degrading, dehumanizing, misogynistic, abusive. What it shows, if that's what their education around sex is, because that is what their education around sex is, because we don't have those conversations with our boys. Most fathers, the conversation they have around their children, their male children, we have conversations with our female children around sex. But we don't have it, we don't lean in the same way with our male children around sex.
Those conversations with our female children are generally about protecting them from guys like us.
That's right, protecting them from guys like us.
Yeah.
And even
because we remember what it was like.
That's right. And if we ask their dad, if your 17-year-old self showed up to see a version of you who's 17 years old showed up to date your daughter, would you let him in the house? And they'd say no, right? So this is where we have to lean in, because most of the sex education for fathers, unfortunately, is really around, well, make sure you wear a condom. Protect yourself. That's really what it is. It's not about consent. It's not about boundaries. It's not about respect. It's not about value. It's not about reciprocation. It's not about any of those things. And the statistic I think that you're thinking you want me to mention here is around consent.
Yeah, the freshman.
So
freshman college.
Yes. So we have a curriculum called Live Respect, Life Skills and Well-Beings for Boys and Young Men that we wrote with Scholastic. And it's written for middle school and high school boys, and we're going to now incorporate Boys Will Be Human as part of our curriculum cycle.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Yeah, well, it just came out, so we need to, we need to add it. You know what I mean?
There's not a lot of books for boys.
There's very
as
little.
Sweet as it is, there's not much out there.
Right. So, because we're not teaching our boys to be sweet, vulnerable, authentic. We're teaching them to be dominant, aggressive, and non-feeling. We're telling them to stop crying, and when we tell them to stop crying, we're telling them to stop feeling. So that's what happens. So for you folks who are partnered with whether you're a woman or someone else who partnered with a man, and they're saying, I wish he'd share his feelings with me. Why is he being so difficult? He doesn't know how to. We've never learned that, right? It's always been seen as a weakness, and if you do that, there's something wrong with you. You're falling short of the manhood that we're expecting them to live up to. So this curriculum, Live Respect, we surveyed boys from all around the country. I mean, affluent private schools, to underserviced public schools, rural communities, urban communities, indigenous communities. We did a Hmong community in Minnesota where we're getting this information for boys in high school, and we're asking them a number of questions. And there's two stats that I want to share with you. We asked them, and the curriculum is focused on gender equity, healthy masculinity, power, privilege, and healthy masculinity, authenticity, gender equity, power, and privilege. So, and there's lessons, there's 12 lessons, and they're on male socialization, and we call that the man box, to gender norms, media, all these other things. And there's one on consent. And we asked this question to high school boys who look just like you in your community. And we asked them, can you define consent? This was before the curriculum. This was a pre-survey. And only 19% of boys could define consent. 8 out of 10 could not. Now, the thing is that tells us something, right? It explains something. It explains sexual assault in the military. It explains sexual assault on college campuses. It explains why girls and women between 16 and 24 are at the highest risk for being sexually assaulted, because our boys think no means try harder, right, or get her drunk. And if he doesn't do that, if he doesn't keep trying, if he doesn't change his approach, and then ultimately, well, then the last thing is that I just take what I want, because this is what we're taught. The socialization is that in this male-dominated society is that men and boys have more value than women and girls, so women and girls have less value than men and boys, that women on some level are the property of men, and that women and girls are sexual objects. Mm-hmm. So after the curriculum, though, right, one lesson, having a conversation with these boys, that number went from 19 to 75%. Do you know, that's prevention. So between 19 and 75, do you know how many people were not victimized because now this boy knows what boundaries and respect is? Mm-hmm. That he knows that his partner, and we'll say a girl, right? He may have another partner, but I'm just going to use a girl as an example, that her yes needs to be as enthusiastic or more enthusiastic than his. And anything other than a yes is a no. And even a yes with a rigid body is a no. Like, it changed everything. So not only did it not impact those potential victims, but it didn't change the life of those boys who would have been harming someone, and now there's all these issues and consequences for him. So that's where Boys Will Be Human really speaks to it, leans into those spaces that we can have the conversations with our kids, where there's really conversation starters, where we don't have to say, okay, now it's time for the talk. Right? We can say, hey, did you check out this chapter? Look at this.
There's a whole thing. I mean, when he told me that, it really blew my mind. And it made me really sad also. Because I guarantee I would have been one of the 17-year-olds who couldn't define consent. Guaranteed.
Yeah. And, I'm sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
no, please.
Well, I just want to, again, just, reemphasize it. Think about a young man in your community. He's a junior in high school, right? Good kid. And he takes a young woman out. She's a junior in high school, too. Takes a young woman out, ask her to go to a movie. He's not even calling it a date. He's just taking her to a movie. Hey, you want to hang out and go to a movie? His name's John. Her name's Kathy. So John gets on a group text with a couple of his buddies, good kids now. And he says to them, hey, I'm taking Kathy out. I'll hit you guys up later, all right? You all following me? Okay. Takes her to the movie. They give him a little crap for that, but, that's what they do. He takes her to the movie. Brings her home. He's a perfect gentleman. And he gets back on the group text and says, hey, guys, I'm back. Is the first thing those boys ask him is, how was the movie? So that's our collective socialization. You all know the answer to that because you know what boys are taught and what they're not taught. So that's where, again, these prevention models that are in this book are really helpful.
You don't got to show the book anymore. Everyone knows what it looks like. There's a part of the book called French Fries and Consent. That was one of my favorite things to write. It was inspired by a YouTube video I saw called Consent and Tea. Have you guys seen that video?
Yes.
And I was like, okay, well, boys don't drink tea. So I made it about French fries. And it's been that's one of the sections of the book that parents have just been really grateful for. Yeah. Because it's like, if somebody doesn't want the French fries, you don't force them to eat the French fries. Yeah. Right? And you just think about it in this way, and you're like, oh, wait, but why are we doing that with sex? Mm-hmm. How is that permissible, but yet, when I think about French fries and forcing it, it's like gross to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you think about those types of things, and there's just not enough out there. You know, so we have to have a revamp of sex education completely.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm grateful that you're doing the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you. And with I want to talk about authenticity, because one of the things that I want to talk about, thank you, authenticity. One of the things that's really clear as a thread through the book is the importance of self-acceptance and authenticity, right? Like, that's a really important thing for us to be our full, authentic selves, right? Can you speak about that a little bit, about how that shows up in the book for you?
For me, it's about modeling. You know, I had authenticity for me is really about vulnerability. It's about honoring who I am today, how I feel in whatever given moment, and not like doing the normal stereotypical, like, how you doing? I'm good. Right. It's like, oh man, like I told you, you asked me how I'm doing. I'm like, man, I didn't sleep much last night. I'm really tired. But I'm okay. Mm-hmm. I'm good. I'm here. Like, that's authenticity to me. Like, we're sharing space. I'm grateful for you, but I'm tired. And that's okay to be tired. Mm-hmm. Whereas my entire life, it wasn't okay. Yeah. Because I got to show up. I have to push through, right? That's a big part of being a man. And then the vulnerability piece is really important, because I think, vulnerability, and the definition of vulnerability for me is simply the act of sharing something that I would normally conceal to maybe appease my image. And in the sharing of those things, there's like this freedom that happens for me. And it makes me feel lighter, makes me feel freer. And so the whole book for me, and really so much of what I try to do with the platform that I have, is to just be as honest as possible. Because I think that we're just, I don't know, there's a void of it. There's a void of like true honesty that isn't just being shared for like TikTok likes or like Instagram likes, you know? Because if we're not able to see other people go through it or experience various things, then when we feel things, we're going to feel alone. I talked about this today with my dad on the Tamron show. You know, my dad was a very emotional man. He's Italian, sensitive. We watch movies. I would always see him cry. You know, you watch the end of Field of Dreams and he's crying, or Rudy and some of his favorite movies, or my movies, and it was always, I remember him crying when his mom died. I always remember my dad being emotionally open and sensitive. And now, you know, he's getting a little bit older. He'll just cry when for anything. It's just something that happens to a man. Is you spend enough time, I think, in your life just like bottling stuff down, and then finally when you're older and you have nothing to prove, it just wells up and comes out of you. And that's my observation of what I think happens to men as they get older. But one of the interesting things about my dad is that he came from a political family. And his father was an immigrant, came here from Italy, and then became a senator in Indiana. And he was raised with this idea that, like, we can't let people in. People can't, like, there's this image that we have. And I think it's not just his family, but it was just the way that men were in the 50s. Right. In the 60s, like, everybody's at an arm's length. If there's any financial issues, if there's any issues, nobody knows about it. We still have our car. We still got our things. You still go to the good school. You still get the bikes every year. Mm-hmm. Probably even my grandma didn't know about it. Mm-hmm. And therefore, he didn't know about it. So he grew up thinking that's what a man is. Yes. So as I was being raised, I had a very sensitive and emotional father. But there's a difference between sensitivity and emotion and vulnerability. Mm-hmm. So it's one thing to be able to cry. It's one thing to be able to show your emotions, to be able to feel things, which is a beautiful thing, because most of us men can't. That's probably why I am the way that I am, because I had an emotionally intelligent, sensitive father. But then the next piece of it is vulnerability, which is, can you share things that you're embarrassed about, that you feel shame around? Can you let other people in and see the parts of you that maybe you're not proud of? And if you've been conditioned to believe those parts of you are bad and that they should never be shared, then you're never going to share them. So I never saw my dad depressed, sad, unless somebody died. I never saw him struggling with anything. Even when him and my mom would get in fights or arguing, there was never like, oh, your mom and I are going through something. It was never shared. It was just like this. Mm-hmm. And so then I grow up, and it's okay, I can get it. And then I grow up, And I'm feeling all these things, and life hits you in the face, and then you're like, this isn't supposed to be this way. Because you don't have a example of the person who was your hero experiencing the things that you're then experiencing as an adult. So you don't get it. So the solution to that, in terms of kind of going back to your question, is sharing those parts of ourselves so that other people don't feel alone. Yes. Sharing those parts of themselves with parts of myself with my children like that. So even now, at 5 and 7 years old, I tell them, Daddy's had a rough day, or I have some anxiety, or I'm feeling sad today. And they can start to remember that, oh, my dad, who is like, to them right now, I am big and strong and I'm like a superhero. If I'm feeling sad, then when they grow up, they're going to know that that's not an embarrassing or shameful feeling or emotion to have. Exactly. And that's what I tried to do in the book, is to share those things, because to a young boy, grow up, I'm relatively known, I have money, like I'm successful, whatever. But if I can share those things, then he can share those things, right? Because at some point, like the goal, like whether it's being an athlete or a musician or an actor or a director, whatever it is, we need to start seeing more of those types of men modeling authenticity and vulnerability and sharing these things, because then it's going to give permission to an entire new generation.
That's exactly right. And that's why when you approached me about the TED Talk, and you were feeling, well, how were you feeling at that point about
I was going to back out.
Right, you were going to back out.
I tried to quit that thing like twice or 3 times,
and
they wouldn't let me.
Yeah, and I wasn't going to either, because I was like, no, we need you to speak up, because you're a man who other men look up to. On a very,
I don't know.
On a very high level.
I don't know if they admit that. I might be.
They may not admit it, but they do, right? Because even the hate
it's like that
secret,
the secret lookup, baby, right. Maybe.
Well, even maybe the hate that you get on like some posts or things like that around talking about vulnerability, they are on your IG or wherever it is, right?
Like, what are you doing on my page, man?
Yeah. Well, because this is what I'm saying. So. Because we need, again, men who have influence and platform, in particular, to be able to step out. So when you see a Justin Baldoni talk about vulnerability, because that's also around mental health, right? You're healthier as a person when you share what's going on. So that's why, men are dying 5, 6 years earlier than women, right? We can directly tie that to stoicism and rigid notions of manhood and pushing down those emotions that never get expressed. That emotional stress, literally, that you keep pushing down, manifests itself into a physical stress and shows up in all these different ways, including death by suicide, which is about 3.5 times higher among men than among women. So something is not working for us, right? It's all connected. So that vulnerability is so important, and you using your influence and platform, because when you see the Michael Phelps speak out around mental health, DeMar DeRozan, who's a basketball player, speak out about it. LeBron James is on the Calm app talking about mental fitness. I mean, when men like yourself and like those men speak out, that makes a difference. It makes it safer, because vulnerability has always been seen as something that women do, and if you do that, then you're somehow not a man, and therefore less than a man. And all of these, again, based on these idiotic rules around masculinity, this man box, these rules that we're expected to live with them, that are literally killing everyone, including men and boys.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. So what is your hope at this point, that if a parent brings this home to their 11-year-old son, what is your hope at the end of the book that young boy will experience?
I have 2 hopes. One is that the parent reads it with them.
Yes.
And that was always the goal, is like, oh, can a dad read this with his son? Like that's because I know when I read, even when I did the audio book, I was like, oh man, I need this. Mm-hmm. I joke, and when I wrote Man Enough, my first book, at the end of it, which became the final chapter, when I had first given it to my wife to read the manuscript, she read it. She was like, wow, baby, this is really good. And now I think you need to read it.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah,
like my wife holding me accountable. It's like, I think you need to read it now. That's good. You wrote it, now you need to read it.
Good, yeah.
And so I literally put that at the end of Man Enough.
That's good.
And I read this and I was like, wow, I need to read this again, so I don't forget.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I hope for parents, especially, that it can be one of these things that kind of that one helps them connect. Like there's exercises in the book.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be amazing. Like I imagine, someone reading this to their 13-year-old boy or 14-year-old boy, and let's say it's a dad, and the dad's like, oh yeah, something happened to me like that. They pause, they put down the book, and they share the story about like, I was introduced to porn and then boom, there's a conversation because they're on the same playing field now. And I think the other issue with sex education when it comes to parenting is that we oftentimes talk down to our kids. And I think this can level the playing field because all we want as children is to like have our experiences validated. So to have a parent then share, even if it's a mom, be like, oh yeah, like this is really real. And maybe a mom shares, there's a 1 in 4 chance that she's been sexually abused or assaulted. That maybe she shares something with her boy about something that happened to her. And then he's like, what? That happened to my mom? Like, and then maybe he starts to think about things different. And that's the power of storytelling and sharing stories and vulnerability. So that's really my hope. And then the other hope is that a boy can read this and grow up. And like you said, like you had 75% increase in these boys who were able to then identify what consent is. And that is, 2/3 of boys that are not out there assaulting people, whether it be on purpose or on accident, because they think what they're doing is socially acceptable. So I don't know, if one boy reads this book and then doesn't assault a girl, I mean, I don't know the ripple effect of that, but to me, that's what matters, and that's why I wrote it.
Thank you. So your dad's in the audience, right?
Pops.
This is my first time meeting Sam?
Yep.
Sam. And so Justin comes in, and Justin's usually the best looking guy in the room, but he wasn't today. Right, so this may be why I don't see you too much, Sam. It's just I don't know, Pops, you keep coming with me like this. Can't roll with me all the time, Dad. So, but clearly,
doesn't he look like the Dos Equis guy used to look, the most interesting man in the world?
The most interesting man in the world. There he is. So clearly, there's a love between you two that I witnessed there, and you can feel it here, you can see it here, right, folks? So. And I would say, I'm sure, Sam, if you and I were to talk, because I also have a very close relationship with my children. 2 of them are here today. You can say hello, guys, right? Yeah. But I also know that I did the best I could as a father. But looking back, there's things I would have done differently because I have retrospect, right? I have hindsight, right? So if you can look back, right, you have 2 children.
2, 5 and 7.
5 and 7, and their genders are
boy and girl.
Boy and girl.
Yeah.
So if you can look back, how has this kind of changed you as a father? This journey from 7. So your oldest, when you did the TED Talk, was 1 or 2.
She was 1.5. 2.
Right, yeah. Right. So now she's 7, and your boy is 5. So
5
you've really
7 days after my boy was born.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you've gone on your own evolution as you've also evolved as a father, as you've become a father, really, right? Have you really become a father? So what has that been like for you? And if you get to look back, what impact do you want to have? Like, how do you want to best impact your children, and what is it like for you now?
Well, for one, I want to be really close with my children. That's one thing that I really want. I feel like in the last 5 years, I mean, what's interesting is that I've been doing, I don't know, it's probably been 8 or 9 years I've been into this work, which, standing next to you at 30 years is miraculous, right? And I can only imagine how it's changed you. But I feel like just in the last 2 years, it's really kind of like dropped in for me. Mm-hmm. It's like there's been a lot of work done conceptually and learning. I really feel like I was, and I'm learning every day, but like this first 5 years have just been learning and learning and learning and learning. And then these last 2 years was just, I dropped in and I had to work through a lot of stuff. And my hope is that my kids can grow up and feel like that they have a dad that always showed up, that always held their feelings and their emotions, that never put himself above them, was healthy with boundaries, and that it can transfer into almost as we get older. For me, fatherhood, I wanted to not be a friendship per se, because I want to maintain the father aspect with my kids, but a reciprocal relationship. And one of the fun things that I hear from my dad is how much he says he learns from me, which I think is really sweet. And to be able to take that and have a humble posture of learning, because my kids are going to teach me a lot, and be willing to let my kids teach me a lot, and like let my ego dissolve in a similar way that my dad's ego is dissolved. You know, they say that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but then I introduced them to my dad, which I think is really, really sweet, because here he is like learning all the time, and I want to be like that as well. And then, another big lesson that I've learned and been learning is, besides how fast it goes, is just trying to figure out how to really pay attention to my kids. I found myself even doing the work publicly. There was times when I would feel this like internal, and I'm sure you felt this, but like the socialization shows up strong, right? Like the force is strong. And you want to like tell your boy to like toughen up. There's like a part of you that like wants to do it. And I'm like, he's like whining about something or crying about something. And like there's a part of me that's like wants to like fix it. And I have to, it's like this weird thing where I have to stop, because the part of me that wants to fix it is the part of me that was bullied by kids for showing those same traits. So it's like this reparenting of myself that's happening in this moment.
That's right.
With my son, and then with my daughter, and then trying to teach them the things that I'm learning in a digestible way. But then I realized the only way I can really do that is by modeling it. So it's really been this experiment. And my hope is that at the end of it, that the experiment pays off. And in many ways, I want to have similar relationships that you have with your, with all your kids, with all 45 of your kids.
Okay.
But I'm joking. I'm joking.
No, wait
That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke.
But
I really do. The way that you are with your with your boys and your kids, and just the friendship, but you're still the father, and they show up for you, and they're proud of you, and you're proud of them. Like, that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And he doesn't have 45 kids. I'm just giving him shit.
But I wanted to respond to that because it's really interesting. So, as you know, I have 6, right? So, 3, but
so you said whoa, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, and the reason why. Okay, be vulnerable here. So I have 6. 3 are biological, and then 3 have come to me as teenagers. 1 is here, and then there's 2 others. They're multiracial. We have different white kids, black kids, and throughout the gender spectrum as well. And the reason why I wanted to almost share with you, because I have my own thing around black men, and not being like, I worry about the stereotype that you have of men who look like me and father and parenting. So even when I say 6, I always feel like I have to, and this is who they are, and they're really mine, and I take care of them. Like all of that comes up for me.
Oh, wow.
I mean, no, it really comes up for me. So because I know what a wonderful dad I am, and these kids, and I'm with these kids every day of my life. But you don't know that. So when a number gets attached of like more than 1, right? I feel like I have to say, well, wait a minute now.
That's interesting, man. Thank you for sharing that.
So that's what that was.
I'm gonna have to. So my best friend Jamie, I'm gonna have to stop giving him shit then about all his kids too.
Well, he might not have the same reaction I have, but I really.
Well,
do.
his reaction is more because he's 15 and he has like tiny kids, and he's like, "What am I doing? Why did I do this again?" No, thank you for sharing that though. It wasn't something I thought about.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, but he is an incredible father, and I want that. I see that, and I want that. I want my kids to want to show up when they're in their 20s. And hang out with me at something like this, because they're not annoyed at hearing their dad talk for the last 25 years. He's smiling.
So,
Yeah, where are we?
yeah, we're probably at the point where we should open up a little
Yeah,
bit.
let's do it.
Okay. So, right, Celeste? All right, give it up for Celeste, everybody. All right. So, anyone have any questions for? Yes.
Either of us, by the way. He is a fountain of knowledge that. Hi.
You can say your name if you'd like. And
My name is Danielle. First, I want to say I love you because you're awesome. I was seeing you a lot in your live chats during COVID.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful.
You did the box breathing with me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also just like the live chats that you have for people who really needed it. I think
Mm.
it was really impressive. And you took time from and with your wife, who's also amazing.
Mm.
So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
My question is for you and both of you. I'm a mental health therapist, and I work with children and adults of all ages. I work with children in Brooklyn that are underprivileged, and I do sometimes struggle with children who are boys, who are young, who are going through that transition of puberty, who this book seems to be perfect for them.
Mm.
And wanting to be cool and wanting to be like what they think a man is, but society and their demographic might not show them that. So I was wondering what kind of advice that you would give me as a mental health therapist trying to help these kids.
I'm going to pass it to the expert. I have thoughts, but I rarely get. He is literally an expert in this. So you please take some of the space.
Thank you. Well, being there with the open heart that you have for them and the love that you have for them is a big start, right? So even if they may not feel like they can show you that they appreciate it, it's landing on kids. It just does. So I would say that if there's a way for you to connect these kids, right, and maybe you can start something even in your school around something around like a Boys Will Be Human Club or something like that, but to really recruit some, in addition to yourself, some male representation also to recruit, maybe do some sort of joint thing where you can bring these kids and just have conversations around being male identified, being a kid in this school, like what are some of the challenges, giving them an opportunity to like share what's going on with them. A lot of times we'll just assume this is what they need and we'll speak to them. And we're going to give you this, fix it, right? We're going to fix it where that fix might be something totally different. I was recently with the, we're in some schools for the Department of Education. The Chancellor Banks here in New York is working with our organization, bringing our curriculum into some of the schools. And we did like a listening tour of kids who are in the schools. What do you need from the if you had a wish list? And there were some like really things that I would have never thought about. Like there was a young woman who was talking about, it wasn't even with the school, it was like more street lights, because when it gets darker, I want to be able to walk home safely, right? Like just street lights. Like, wow, I wouldn't, I didn't think about that, but a lot of things as a man, I'm not thinking about, and you women on a daily basis have to think about things all the time around safety, protection, not being harmed. So if there was a way for you to organize, either if it's not going to be able to be in the school, to maybe with a partner organization within the school district that works with boys that you can also support and help empower, maybe try to bring some resources to that program, and then be able to send some of your boys there or have them come in and do a satellite within the school that you're in or something like that, but to really just kind of community organize. That's really what you need, because there's people out there doing it. Yeah, you just have to find them. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, and I would just add to validate, and I think that it would be really interesting for a therapist, if I was a young boy talking like to a guidance counselor or a therapist, to like put yourself kind of like a parent on their level, like I was talking about, and share personal things. I know that there's client privilege stuff, and you have to be careful with what you share, but I think that I would imagine a therapist sharing with a 13-year-old boy an experience that you had could be helpful in opening him up. And I think because if parents do it, I think it could be interesting for a therapist to do it. Because I know that whenever a therapist for me or my therapist has shared something, it's validated the feelings that I've had. It makes me feel safe. And really at the core, what you're trying to accomplish is like a space of safety so that they can open up. And then you can start to talk about like, well, what is cool? Unfortunately, as young boys, because we want to become men, you being or identifying as a woman, which I'm assuming you are, is it's going against you. So we need more male teachers, as we know. We need more male therapists, as we know, especially for young boys. I think there was some stat that I heard, like 3% of kindergarten teachers are male or something like that. And then we know that the stats for teachers, black men, is even lower. So in just general, like that's just something that we need more of so that boys can grow up and have those kind of healthy role models. So maybe you have a male therapist that's a friend of yours, could partner with in some of those situations. That would be helpful. Yeah. Thanks for hanging out during the pandemic. That was whew.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm here with my 13-year-old very embarrassed daughter.
Oh, don't be embarrassed. That's awesome.
Something you said really struck a chord with her as she was listening. I'm an educator, so I'm excited to read the book, and I think a lot of what you talked about is really helpful. But the piece that struck her was the bullying and sort of how you dealt with that, and as somebody that she looks up to who is so successful in life now, how you sort of got through that because she's struggling with that right now.
Of being bullied? Yeah. It is, when you want to talk about a epidemic of sorts, like we have a bullying crisis happening.
Yeah.
Social media or just in person? In person, yeah. I remember, I mean, my parents didn't even really know. I remember, and I didn't know I had anxiety. I had no clue, but the feeling that I had in my body was for sure anxiety because I'm feeling a lot of it these days as a grown man. And I remember just being crippled with it because I was so afraid to go to lunch or, I used to go to the bathroom early so I could like leave class because I didn't want, I would avoid going on like to recess and on the playground, because they would just find me. There was this certain kid that would find me and it was terrible. And this was pre-social media. So I'm getting old. This is weird. I feel young, but I'm getting old. So it was like there was none of that for us. It was just bullying. And at the end of the day, what's helped me now as an adult when I think back to it is that anybody who bullies is simply trying to fill the void in them because they feel so terrible about themselves. And there's something about you that you represent that they haven't healed in themselves or haven't figured out. My mom would always be like, oh, they're just jealous of you. And I'm like, no, Mom, stop. You can't. It never helped. So don't say that, Mom. But like, no, I'm joking. But it never helped because it was just like, they're definitely not jealous of me. You haven't heard the things they say to me. That's not it. And then they're definitely not jealous of like little me eating lunch by myself, like, and when I'm 12 and 13 years old. But understanding that the way that we try to heal as people is in an unhealthy way, and especially with men, is we are just looking to feel better about ourselves in any way possible. And the high that you get from bullying another person is a temporary fix. It's like a hit. It's a drug. And at the end of the day, then they go back and they feel terrible about themselves. And maybe their home lives are terrible, or maybe their parents are getting a divorce, or maybe they were sexually abused and they don't know what to do with it. And we see a lot of that with bullying, especially with boys. So I would just, exercise and practice like superhuman compassion. Because besides telling your mom, besides telling the school, besides all the things that you're going to do, there's nothing that you can actually do to stop it. The only thing that you can do is to know that they are hurting. And if you don't let them hurt you, it might get worse for a minute, but then it'll stop. Because nobody wants to like fight a person that's on the ground just like being docile and laying there. That's not fun for anybody because there's no response. So I don't know. It's not about like putting on armor. It's not about like pretending like you're impermeable or you're not hurt. But there's like this, when they're mean to you, if there's a way that you could like almost feel sadness for them because you know that you're enough and there's nothing they could do to take it away, then I think it might start to help you as you move forward. And that said, then there's a line. Because bullying reaches a point where then it's not okay anymore. And that's when mom's got to step in and shit's going to hit the fan because Mama Bear is going to come out and just go nuts. But that's like really, and to know, and I would just say like, it might be then embarrassing to tell your mom and to have your mom call, but like that is going to reach a point where that's just what has to happen. Because there's a lot of young people your age taking their lives for this very reason. And they don't know that they were enough before. And so like that's just really, really important to think about. Oh, mom, I'm sorry. It's so hard to see. It's so hard to see your.
Right on with everything you're saying. It's really timely. So being an outside voice and somebody she respects saying so.
Well, thank you. And just know that like it gets better. It really gets better, and then it will get worse. Like it's just, I deal with different types of bullying now. And that's just what it is. And what's interesting is I've joked with my wife a lot. I'm like, I'm way too sensitive to be a public figure. I'm like, what? Like, how did this even happen? I'm like the last person, because someone could say, there could be like 1,000 people that say something really nice, and then I'll randomly see the one thing, and my night is ruined. And it's like the power that I give to a negative voice comes from how I was bullied when I was your age. Because it didn't matter if there was a bunch of friends that I had or if people were nice to me. It was like the one person that just sucked all my joy. So now, as like a grown man, I'm still overcoming some of that stuff. And I have to remind myself that like that person who hated on me or didn't like something or whatever, that doesn't affect me. Like I can't give them my power. Easy in concept, really hard to do. But I'm telling you, like you wake up every day and you like look in the mirror and you remind yourself and you tell yourself that like doesn't matter what those girls say to you, doesn't matter what they do to you, you're going to be okay. They're hurting. You have an awesome mom that took you to see Justin. And we'll like before we leave, we'll like take a picture together and we'll make a video or something, and then they'll just get so jealous and it'll be awesome.
There you go. There you go. Nice. We could take 2 more, but before we do that, I just want to, I would like all of us to, first of all, it was a great response, and I love the we are enough, right? So what I'd like to do is for everyone to say it so that I'm sure that you will. And we say that I am enough. I am enough. Right?
There we go. And what was your name? You can say it. Jolie. All right, on 3, we're going to say, Jolie, you are enough.
There we go.
Take it in, Jolie. Listen, take it in. 1, 2, 3.
Jolie, you are enough.
You got to believe it.
All right. But the video's going to really, that's.
Oh, yeah, we'll make him jealous.
That's the one.
We'll make
Yeah,
him
that
jealous.
was nice, Mom, but the video. There was it in the back here? All the way in the back, and then go to you. And if we can squeeze a third
We'll
in.
get, we'll get.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, we're going to just go. Yes.
Unless you got to go, and I'll just stay here.
No,
That's
I'm
cool.
good.
Hi.
I'm a single mother, and I have a son. Where was that book? It was so hard to explain to him because there's a whole bunch of girls in my family, and all the boys were always out working, my brother. So he used to ask me questions, and I used to cry. I'd have to run to the bathroom and cry, say, how can I answer him? But why yours is different from mine? How do I use the bathroom? Why you sit down and I have to stand up? So it was so hard.
Yeah.
My son is going to be 27 years old, and I see him like thinking about things, and it's so hard for me to ask him like what's going on, because today the new generation, they're not like us at the past. I used to tell my mother everything,
Yeah.
and it's so hard for me because I break my head around like what's going on with my son. What can I tell him? How can I be that father figure, mother figure at the same time like I've been? But now I see him like he's been closed in.
Have you told him that? What you just told me?
I talk to my son, but I hear him talking to his friend, and I'm like, wow, why he can't talk to me like that? I guess I was raised different because me and my mom, we were best friends.
I think every young man goes through a phase where they kind of push away, and eventually he'll come back. You just keep showing up as mom, and but I would definitely try to have a real combo with him and just be vulnerable with him and just say, hey, I feel like this and I feel like this, and eventually it doesn't matter what you say, he'll hear you and he'll be thinking about it and he'll come back. Yeah, of course. We get embarrassed by our parents. That's what happens. Then they come back. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you
that.
for your question. And
Oh,
as a mom, you are enough.
I mean, being a single mother to a boy is so hard. So, so props
Sounds like
to
you've
you.
done a great job,
Yeah.
actually. But the woman, right? The glasses and the mask. Yes, please. Hello.
So my question is, do you think about this in the role of speaking with your father? Like, now we talk about boys, but how do we talk to our fathers?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
That's what I would want as a woman, as a married woman, within the family.
Yeah.
How do we talk to our parents and our dads specifically, who didn't have access to this information, who don't have access a lot? Are you bridging that with it?
Yeah. I mean, he's here right now. It's been a big. I found myself in a place where I wasn't able to continue the public journey unless I figured out the private one. And so it's been a twin process for me of making sure that whatever I'm talking about, I'm doing the work first. And so a big part of that was definitely my dad, and we always have conversations where if stuff's going to come up for me and I remember something and I'll talk to him about it, and he might be defensive, or he's actually getting so much better about just taking it and listening and not trying to fix it, or and that's just super helpful and healing. And I'm curious your thoughts, because he's got more experience with his boys, but I think it's important to think about your dad. And I don't know, the like, it's the wrong analogy, but I'm seeing like levels of just, you are on a level where you're able to understand this in a certain way. And if you think about if you were just to judge your father's emotional intelligence or capacity, I would just try to find the level that he's on and go there. Because so often we want and expect our parents to be where we are, at like, we've done this work, or we've read these books, and we're interested in all of these things, and we're woke, or whatever it is, and we want our parents to kind of meet us there, and that's not fair. Just like it wasn't fair, a lot of the stuff that happened to us, that wasn't, their intention, but impact and intention are very different things. It's not fair for us to then expect them to be at a certain place, and so it's trying to figure out, like, okay, what's the language that I can use where they can hear me? Versus then just like being, well, why don't you get this, or dad, what, because he's not going to hear you. And we have to have and compassion for how he was raised, which, as my dad said, like, my dad's dad never told him that he loved him. So he grew up never hearing those words. And look how good he did. And sure, there was areas that he could have improved on, and things that I'm healing and frustrated by or resentful for that I'm working on, and we talk about it. But I've learned that I need to approach him where he's at. And if I can go there, then it's a digestible conversation, versus like trying to talk, try to speak to him in a language he just doesn't understand, which is what we struggled with early on. So I don't know if that's helpful.
No, I think that was a great answer, actually. And I would also say that maybe having a conversation with him, like, Dad, I want to share with you two things that were really amazing that you did, or that I experienced. Like, to go to him with an invitation.
Yeah, I need to do more of that. I generally just tell my dad all the things that are wrong. I'm like, Dad, this is fucked up.
Because I think that all of us, I would think, but certainly our fathers are really trying the best they can with what they know. So when we come in a little bit critical or questioning, like, why don't you? Not that you're doing that. I'm just saying that it could feel like an indictment, and we need to make it an invitation, right? So that to really invite him to, you've been incredible, and not waiting till Father's Day to do it, right? But you've been incredible.
That's across the board, by the way. That's just the male thing in general. Like, I get so many people that reach out and talk, like, how do I talk to my boyfriend? How do I talk to my brother? How do I talk to my father? How do I talk to my uncle? And what you just said is the answer. Yeah. Our egos are so fragile as men because of how we've been socialized that anything can make us feel, introducing the fake word, emasculated. Anything can, because we've been raised in a culture that tells us that we have to, on a daily basis, prove our masculinity. So when we're constantly trying to prove our masculinity, the second something comes in and enters our orbit that could maybe like penetrate and hurt us or make us feel not good, then we put up our defense system. And it doesn't matter if you're a father or if you're a 13-year-old boy or if whatever. that's just what we do as men. And so one of the things they do at A Call to Men is we talk about calling men in
And not
instead of calling them out.
That's
Because the second you call a man out, and look at what's happening in the country right now. The second we call men out and we're just like on men and hard on men, and again, there's reasons to be hard on men. I'm not saying this blanket.
Right.
But the second we start to do that, there's just nothing comes in. And it's just their force fields go up, and it's just boom, they're impenetrable, and they don't listen. We don't listen. How do I know? Because I've been that guy. I am that guy today sometimes. If you catch me at the wrong time and my wife's talking about something, I'll just put it up, and then I'll be like, oh shit, and then luckily I can come back fast.
Right.
But it's trained in us. And so for the older men, for fathers, it's like we're talking about years and years and years of reversing.
Right.
So I think that's great advice for everybody, what you just said.
Good. Yeah, I'm going to go to you and then over here, and then we'll go back here, and I see there. I'm sorry? Okay, so let me just I'll just go to you first, and then if you can show me who that was.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth. Now that you've written 2 books kind of in this space, how has it changed the film projects that you go and approaching the
Yeah, well, so what's interesting is I haven't made a movie in the 3 years that I've written 2 books. And I'm about to go make one, which some of you probably know. I can tell you that this work is the reason I'm making It Ends With Us. It's the reason I'm playing Ryle and wanting to play him. It's embedded in everything that I do. It's kind of like the code of the Matrix, right? It's like once you see it, it's everywhere. You see it in everything, right? I say it's like one of the largest issues of our time and of all time. And I really think that if we fixed this thing, if it was as simple as men were raised everywhere tomorrow, and there was like a mass global event hypnosis where like men were suddenly allowed to feel their feelings or embrace all the parts of them that were human, I think so many of the world's problems would just vanish. Like yep. It would be instant. And so like we focus on, climate change and all the political stuff and left versus right and all of these various things, but like the symptoms are so similar. They're all very much this one thing. And so it affects everything. And especially like It Ends With Us, which is really about generational trauma and abuse, which is something that, Ted's worked in the space for 30 years. Bringing that to a character like that was really interesting to me, so I can explore those parts of myself as well. And in some ways, like playing him is also helping me heal, if that makes sense.
Thank you. You said there was a man's hand over here too? Yes, go ahead, please.
I'm Logan.
Hey, Logan.
So I was raised very traditional, male voice don't cry, don't show emotions. And I'm seeing my parents who are now raising my nephew going through the same cycle of big boys don't cry. And one day I plan to have kids of my own. I'm wondering how can I approach my parents and try to share the message of maybe there's a better way of just I don't know, teaching your kids to express themselves and be themselves the best they can be.
That's a great question, and really I admire that in you. So congrats, man. You're way ahead of the game there. So when you are ready to have kids, you'll be thinking about it. One of the reasons why I create as much content as I do is to make those conversations easier. Because sometimes it's hard to have the direct conversation with your parents versus hey, listen to this podcast episode with Ted Bunch and his child, Jalen, right? So one of the things we don't talk about is Ted just came on my podcast, and we had a fantastic conversation with his child, who identifies as they, them. And it was an amazing conversation, right? You learn a ton by watching him go through this journey, or the episode with me and my father, or whatever like that. So that's one of the things that I find helpful for people is, I've heard a lot of women have introduced men to the podcast because it helps them have conversations that are very hard for them to have because they're hearing us have them. That's what the book is for. That's what the TED Talk, all this stuff is for that. I'm seeing some smiles, so clearly that's happened in the room. And at the same time, it's cool to just be super open and vulnerable with them and be like, hey guys, I want to share something with you that's on my heart. And hopefully they listen. Ted, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this one,
no,
especially.
that's what I was going to say also, is to really share with them that you've been great parents and I've learned so much, and all the good stuff, right? And there's other tools that we can use for your nephew, right? And also to spend some time with your nephew, you and he as well, right? To really spend some time and to be able to pour into him all the things that you think are important too. You know what I mean? Because they may not change, right? And they're doing what, again, their generation, look, we're providing a roof over his head, he's got food, he's in school, give me a break. You turned out just fine, right? All of those things, right, Logan? So, make sure you spend some time with him as well. But I do like the idea of sharing.
Because he probably also looks up to you, right? And that's the thing, is like young boys need role models. And so if you have a nephew that I guarantee if he looks up to you, then what you say is going to actually impact more than what your parents say, because they're older.
And I'd like to ask, how old is he?
He's turning 5 soon.
Okay,
Yeah. That's where it starts, man. My son's 5. Yeah.
Great.
So time with you is going to playing with him, just on the ground playing with him, and letting him know that you cry too. I tell my son the heart is the strongest muscle in the body. That's the thing that I tell him over and over and over again. And even if he doesn't understand what that means, you just start to work on that.
There were some other hands. Okay. Yes, over here. I'll go to you next.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm here with my sister who asked an
Hi.
question. My question is an extension of your question, which is, are there any films through Wayfair Studios that are on the docket that touch on these themes?
At Wayfair Studios,
Good idea.
we have. Well, what's interesting is, so there's 2 movies that we just made. One is about teen girls, believe it or not, called Empire Waste, and bullying and fat shaming and things like that. And it's really a wonderful, beautiful movie. And another one's called The Senior, which is about masculinity, but it's told through sports, and a relationship with a father and a son. It Ends With Us is very much about this, believe it or not, because the character of Ryle is really an example of trauma coming back to hurt women. And we are, and there's a bunch of movies that we're developing that are, this runs, it's a through line that runs through. There's a book called Saturday Night Ghost Club. It's a fun book, but it's really about masculinity and the ghosts of our trauma and our past and how they work, all set in kind of like this fun night adventure thriller with these kids. So there's a bunch of stuff like that we're constantly working on.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to go here. You've been very patient. Go ahead, please, with the turtleneck.
Hi, I'm Dessa. I'm an actress, and I think what you've been doing with Wayfair Studios is amazing. And to be completely transparent, my first love died of suicide. So that's become I think your message has become really important to me. But
I'm so sorry.
But I'm not an educator, not a therapist. I'm an actor. I'm not even, I'm not a man. How, as an actor, because you're an actor as well, how could I contribute, I guess? That's something I've been stuck for the past year. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Well, the best way you can contribute, is by sharing with men. It's tricky when you're an actor because you're kind of at the will of everybody else. And I think it's just really important for young actors to find meaning and find things that fulfill them that aren't just waiting for a job or that audition. It's what will actually make you happy outside of the few moments a year that you get to be on set? And how can you advocate for this work because of what happened to the person that you loved? And I think that those kind of stories are really valuable and important. And if you really just kind of focus on that and think about, okay, this happened to me. I don't want it to happen to somebody else. How can I use my skills? That could be writing. That could be maybe you write something or you direct something or you use your social media in a certain way. And you become an advocate for men's mental health as a woman. I think that's a really unique, interesting thing. I think we need more of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and then the men that you meet in your world, you talk about this stuff with, and you do it in the name of your love, who I'm sure is with you and guiding you throughout this whole process. So if you tune into that vibration and you tune into him, I think he'll probably help you too, as woo-woo as that sounds.
I want to share that I want to also offer my condolences, but also that there's organizations that focus on mental health for men and suicide prevention, and maybe there's a way for you to teach an acting class at
Great
something
idea.
like that. Yeah.
Or put on a play with them.
Or
I mean,
put on
like,
a play, yeah.
like volunteering is a
Yeah,
great
something
gateway,
like that,
especially
yeah.
at those
Mhm,
organizations.
All right, all the way in the back, and I'll come to you, sir, and then we'll get over here.
Hi, I'm Janet. I'm with two of my friends, and we're all educators. Two of us
Hi.
happen to work in a boys' school.
Oh, wow.
I came across a study recently about how boys react to Andrew Tate, and to my dismay, it's a bit of a mixed bag. Some of them, recognize that there's messaging that is actually counter to all the core values they may have been instilled by their families, by their schools, all of that. And yet there's also a fair number of boys who are intrigued by his voice, that he's standing up and saying something that's on people's minds. He's giving voice to something. And the study went on to point out that the reason why he has traction is because there's a void in this space. The boys are not hearing anything else. So when there's a void, that takes up space. But there's this stuff too, right? How do you make this stuff cool? To boys to want to do it. Now, when
Thanks. I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking.
what we see on the ground. And when we work with our boys and try to talk with them about, talking about their feelings, expressing vulnerability, breaking out of the man box, I get the feeling that they're actually relieved to be able to do those, to have those conversations, and it's important. But it's a battle, right? And they still have to kind of come off as cool, and basically all the stuff that you're trying, all the tropes they're breaking down your book. It's a very ill-framed question.
No, it's not.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you continue to fight that battle? How do you continue to offer that counter-narrative and to make it sexy so that they want to be these good men? And as a woman, I will say I hear you about wanting to, about giving boys, male role models. I feel like they need strong female role models as well, and that's why I
100%.
Absolutely. And anyway, sorry. And thank you for your response in advance.
Thank you. I'll just say something, and then if Justin, if you want to add something to it, but I appreciate that very much, and they definitely need women role models as well, and they have. I think they have probably, at least most of the boys that I know, more, especially in schools, more women role models than male role models. So it's nothing against women role models. It's really that they need, actually. So our work, right? What we've been doing for the last 20 years is amplifying the voice of women to men. We're saying something very similar to what women are saying, but because it's coming from a male voice, it's landing differently because that's what male-dominated societies do. If we're dealing with racism and a white person speaks out to other white people about it, it lands a little differently. So it's really not that black people are saying the wrong things or don't know about racism. It's really that there's something that resonates differently. So I would say that it would be great if you can get if you can recruit some men to do this with you, to have these conversations with you, because then you can also show how that balances the room as well. So I would really encourage that, and I think it is very cool, right? So maybe some kids, some people who those kids look up to. I mean, we use athletes. We use people like Justin, actors, men who, again, other men recognize, look up to, and our work speaks for itself. But when we have someone, a spokesperson that can embody it and to share it, we reach more people. And it's nothing against us. We're doing good work, but it just doesn't land in the same way.
I've been trying to get really cool for this for this reason. Shannon, I've really been trying to get. No, it's true. No, but here's what's interesting is that, believe it or not, when I started this conversation, there was a huge void, and I was like one of the few cool-ish people talking about it,
Right.
and that's how the void was. Right? It's so big, and now there's more conversations happening. Andrew Tate is a response, as you said, and it's not just about masculinity. It's about this collective sadness and feeling of powerlessness that these young boys have. and he's giving them a false narrative to look up to and promises. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter like what we say to these young boys, they still want the nice car, right? They still want to be liked by women. They still, because those things mean you are cool and you are sexy and you have power in this culture. We can't just, you're not just going to change the culture overnight. It's just, it is what it is. So in some ways you have to lean into it. And the solution is like, okay, then there has to be more men that have nice cars that women like, talking about these things as an alternative. So I'm doing my best. I'm not there yet. But in general, that's also really what it is, you know. Maybe I'll make like a really funny video where I'm like in front of a Ferrari talking about, you know, consent. I don't know. But like, you know, but it's true because the difference was he's leading with money, power,
Right.
sex.
Right.
And this conversation is just never going to be as sexy, right? Even though I have all those things, right? But that doesn't matter. So it's just like anything else. We're more attracted to the flashy negative thing than we are to anything else. That's why like I get so annoyed on the freeway when there's an accident and everybody in front of me stops because they're looking at that. This is clean. This is an open road, but they're looking at that, and now I'm an hour late. That's the internet. That's what it is. And I think if you got those boys privately, without the other boys around, I don't think that they would actually believe that Andrew Tate is giving them a solution that's going to make their lives better or make them happier. I think that, again, it's this truth to power, even though it's bullshit,
Right.
that, you know, boys just want to be rebels. And, you know, and if we can teach them at a young age that it's not about, again, boys will be boys, that it's about boys will be human, then you can start to, like, have this next generation maybe not be as drawn to the next Andrew Tate that's going to show up.
I saw two hands. There was one here and then over here, and we got to wrap up. Okay, if we can make it quick, and we'll have just one person response very quickly. Also, to go to you first, sir.
Yeah, I don't know how to do sound bites.
No, that's all.
How do you meet your parents where they are? You know, giving a bit of my story, I was hurt deeply,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm in the process of healing all that trauma. And I have done all that I know how to invite, but my invitations invariably, to use your language, always turns to an indictment, because again, I was hurt so deeply. So in business, when you analyze the situation, you get to a point in my industry, we have a go, no-go decision. Are we going to pull the trigger or not? I feel like after so much effort, I'm at that go, no-go decision. You know, how do you know if the relationship is just toxic and can't be fixed or can't be healed versus meeting them where they are? Because meeting them where they are requires so much effort on my part. I have to literally change who I am. Choose words and language that they can understand because I've gone to college. It's I don't know. How do you meet them where they are? 'Cause I'm stuck.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that, really. And, you know, I would say that don't change who you are, right? Because you are enough. And that what I would recommend is for you to consider writing a letter to yourself from them based on what you want them to say to you, right? So their apology to you. And this is not my idea. Formerly Eve Ensler, wrote a book called The Apology, which she did just that. She basically, her father it's public, she wrote about it, she has a book out. Her father who sexually assaulted her, he's passed away now, but she wrote through his voice to her the apology. So consider that, because maybe that letting you seeing that on paper of what you want from them, and then maybe you consider giving it to them and say, "This is what I would love to hear from you." So that's the best I got for the moment. Yeah. All right. Real quick, and then we'll come back over here. Yes.
Hi, I'm Omar. Thank you so much for everything. And Justin, thank you for texting me tough times on your
Nice.
such
Oh,
thing,
wow, cool.
Yeah, so I
I'm so
appreciate
happy I
that.
saw it.
So I'm a refugee from Yemen, and I'm known in my circle, that, the guy that talks about mental health 24/7. I love that. I push for it every time. But I struggle to bring these conversations up with people who are struggling. My circle is full of refugees who are going through a lot and dealing with a lot. There's airstrikes, their family loans, and this kind of stuff. How do I bring this conversation and make it centered when there's, to them at least, it seems there's a lot going on in the world that this conversation becomes a privilege, right? So for me, like, I tried to invite 5 guys to come with me tonight. None of them showed up. None of them could come up to make this as important for them to come and listen to this. I think it's important. I think there's, I'm a refugee myself. I go through all that myself, but I think there's always space for this. I also, just on the side thing, I work for a human rights organization, so I I think it's important to kind of push for all of these things in equal amounts, even if, the world seems burning.
Yeah.
We still have space for it. How do I bring that to people? I'm struggling to kind of bring my friends onto these conversations.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, with your friends, these are friends of yours also, right? To share, what I would do is let them know. I might even get them together for dinner or sometime when we're together and say, I love you. This is important to me, right? I'd really love for you to hear this out, but let's just talk about, I would love to know like 2 things, like what's not working for you, and you can put the language behind whatever that is, right? Right? What's not working for you? Because there's things that aren't working for me, right? And that's why I feel like we really need to tap into this conversation, because we'll be better as a result. And I want to be closer to you as a result. It means being vulnerable, but anyway, I don't know how someone can really walk away from that without trying to give some effort.
Yeah, I think if you're close friends with them, one of the things that's always worked in my friend group is you model it and you lead. And they might not be at a place where they're ready to come to something like this or to have a conversation, but you can ask them something they're really struggling with, what's not working for you. All the things that are happening. I get it. I mean, the world's burning, and then, you're talking about vulnerability. And also I think collectively there's fatigue around a lot of these social issues too. So there's always going to be people like you that need to hold up everything for everybody else. So you're not tired, but a lot of people are tired, and you can remind people that being tired is a privilege and all the things that you do. But yeah, bringing them together and just sharing something about yourself, giving them the chance to hold it. Maybe only 2 of the guys can hold it, but then those 2 are the dudes that are going to be able to come with you, something like this. But it requires emotional bravery. I'm really struggling with this, and you share something that could make their jaw drop. We all have something that you could never imagine sharing with somebody else. And that's kind of the way you do it. And then you see out of those 5 who has the emotional intelligence and capacity to support you in that. And then you start with those 2.
Absolute last question, if there is one, other than, okay, I'm going to go to this gentleman right here. Yeah.
How you doing, Travis?
Hey, what's up, Travis?
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you both.
Thank you, Travis.
Love the work that both of you do at Call to Men and your podcast, both your books, both amazing work. Appreciate it. Holding space for men. My specific question is for the men who aren't in the room, right? I feel like sometimes when I start this journey, listen to your podcast, and doing some self-reflection, going to therapy about, mental health issues, I felt that I couldn't be a part of those conversations because I was doing things wrong, right? There were certain things I was messing up about, and I said, okay, now I'm back to square one. Now I can't be a part of those conversations because I'm messing up. I can't contribute. So as either of you, how do you, I guess, give yourself grace where you're messing up but still having those conversations and, relearning how to deal with those issues that you're dealing with and talking about on a daily basis, right? Because, we're all human. Everyone in the room, we all make mistakes, but we still want to talk about these issues, right? I'm a guy. I still want to have these conversations with the guys in my circle while I'm also still struggling with it. So how do you do that?
Well, you never arrive. I mean, I'll share something. So, I have a company, foundation. There's a lot of stuff that I do, right? I'm going to go direct a movie. So imagine literally being the guy and then fucking up. Right? So the people that I choose to work with, the people that I bring on, the women that I bring on, all know me as this guy, and then I'll get pissed about something, or I'll interrupt a woman, or something will happen. Imagine that, right? And here I am, like, talking to millions of people and having this public platform. It happens to me all the time. And this is where the grace comes in, because you got to remember that we have been socialized. I'll use the talking over a woman. I recognized just the other day that probably 3 or 4 times in the last month, there was a specific woman that I kept talking over. And I had to and I recognized it. I was frustrated about something. I talked over her, left the conversation, left the Zoom, it was a Zoom. And I reflected, and I was like, shit. And I literally did a TED Talk about not talking over women. That was viewed 8 million times. Right? So I am the example in that. And then here I am. It doesn't just go away, man, because it's been ingrained in us. And this is where grace comes in. And so with that responsibility, right, I have to then go and apologize. And so I'll give you an example. What did I do a couple days ago? Everybody that was on that Zoom call, I sent an email and apologized to her in front of everybody else and called myself out. And then shared how, I'm working on it. I'm not perfect. I'll make sure that this doesn't happen again. And if it does, please give me feedback. That's and then I sent her a unique individual apology for I'm so sorry I did that. It wasn't, it wasn't intentional, and yet it wasn't okay. And that's just the bar that we have to hold ourselves to. And I'm going to fuck up again, and I'm going to mess up again, and I'm going to mess up again. Ask my wife, she'll tell you. And this is it. And if I were to just stop, imagine, if I just stopped doing all this work because I couldn't get it right, then we'd never be here having this conversation. The book wouldn't exist. I would have just given up a long time ago, because if I punish myself every time I screw up, nothing will get done. And this is where I think the conversation with men is really important, and especially women in the room or other men that support other men. We all, I think, have to give each other more grace. Because this is a messy conversation. We talk about our parents. Sometimes you might not feel like anybody deserves grace, and that's fine. That's your journey. But in general, we have to allow there to be more grace. But that can't happen unless we have grace for ourselves. So I can never have grace for another person unless I'm actually doing that work and have grace for myself. So don't let your masculine drive for perfection, don't try to be the best at masculinity, at being the woke version of masculinity. That'll never just happen. You're literally just taking the ideas of the patriarchy and putting it right into this work. And so if you can just remove that from it and be okay, how do I show up to this? Where am I falling short? How can I keep myself accountable? How can I make sure that while I'm doing this work, everybody knows that I am a work in progress and that I'm never going to really arrive? Then you just be the example, And then it means so much when a man apologizes to a woman for interrupting her. It means so, especially when it's in front of other people. And then you just be that example. All right.
Excellent.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Ted. Thank you so much, man.